How about I start with a rare Anthony hot take?
All right.
This Philadelphia Flyers, and this take has a lot more to do with the rest of the NHL than it does with the Flyers themselves. But if the Flyers had a goalie like they had at the beginning of last year in Carter Hart, they would be a lock of a playoff team this season. They are better as a team minus goaltending. Take goaltending out of it. But you talk about the skaters on the ice. They are better than the 5 teams in front of them currently in the Eastern Conference standings. They're just better. And they would be
playing better.
Yeah. Sure. Talent-wise, maybe not. But they play a better game. They play a better style. They play a game. They're not in the top 6 in the East. They're certainly not. But could they be 7? Yeah. Yeah, they could. Columbus is currently 7. Could they be better than Columbus? Yes.
Wouldn't it be funny if we find out that if we look down at the end of the year, middle of April or whenever before the playoffs, and it was the Anaheim game that spurned them, right? Like that got them right off the runway. That would just be, I mean, that would almost be childish in a sense, but appropriate. Like it took that game to get the fire lit, and they haven't lost. Well, they lost to Columbus, but they've gotten points in every game since then.
Correct.
They dominated the Islanders in that second period for sure. I mean, like it was looked like men against boys. And you're right, Anthony. Like, yeah, I hate to like look or pin up the blame on one player because it's a team sport. But man, if their goaltending was up, getting that one save extra a game we talk about, I have no doubt they'd be in the top 6 in the East right now. Just the way their teams played. Now, I'll tell you one thing. It doesn't mean the team will play exactly the same year after year. This is what's happening this year. Right. But Anthony's right. And if they had a goaltender or if they had, a semblance of a guy that can make that critical save, I agree with Anthony. They'd be right there.
I mean, if you look at the standings, I mean, look, Washington's been a bit of a surprise, I think, for the entire league this year. I don't think anybody saw them as the best team in hockey. And they have currently the best record in hockey. The Devils, we knew they would be back. Carolina's Carolina. And then over in the Atlantic, Toronto, they just needed a coach. They got one in Berube. Florida's the defending champ. Tampa's Tampa. So you kind of knew those 6 teams were going to be there. But the rest of the Eastern Conference is just mediocre to bad. Just mediocre to bad. Excuse me. And I think the Flyers play the best team game of all of those mediocre to bad teams.
I totally agree.
Difference is the Flyers don't have goaltending. And that's not a knock on Sam Ersson. Sam Ersson's probably a very good number 2 in this league. I just don't think he's a number 1. Fedotov's been better the last 3 games, but it's 3 games. Let's not get, overjoyed with it. And Kolosov's probably needs time in the AHL. And so really that's really where you're at. And so without a number 1 guy, they're not a playoff team. And I find it interesting, Bundy. We talked about this. We didn't talk about this on air, but we talked about it off air. There was a report that came from Elliot Friedman a week and a half ago, about the Flyers kicking tires on John Gibson with Anaheim. Mm-hmm. He said, "Well, why would they be interested in John Gibson? Like, how is that a fit?" And maybe when you look around the league and you see just how bad the Eastern Conference is, and you go, "We're a playoff team with a goalie."
Yeah.
And they play everybody hard. They play everybody tough. You can win in the playoffs too that way. Like you can. It's crazy to say, but you can.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. If you can just get in, you just never know what's going to happen. I know Russ is smirking right now, but I'm being dead serious. I've seen enough lately.
I know. I'm just
there's some teams like, listen, the New York Islanders. Holy Jesus. If I look at the teams right now and I say, who would I rather be? I would rather be the Flyers right now than the Islanders in terms of team and structure and everything that's gone into it. Everything. Yeah.
And the Islanders have some players. Like they have some good players on that team.
They do. Very, very, very poor structure. If you look at the goals that were scored last night against them, really bad. Really, really bad. They skate in on plays. They don't stop and start. That's how a lot of the goals were started. The Flyers just totally picked them apart for most of the rest of the game after the first period. But Man, I'll tell you what, you're right, Anthony. They got some good players like Barzal,
Anders Lee, Brock
Lee,
Nelson,
Brock Nelson. Yeah, I mean, they got
Horvat.
yeah,
Horvat's
Bo
a good
Horvat,
player.
Travis Konechny's cousin. Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
but they just can't seem to put it together. Just can't do it.
No, that's an example, Bundy, where if you sat there and said, if I had to say which team has more talent, the Islanders probably have more talent than the Flyers.
Probably,
certainly have more top end talent.
Top end talent, right?
Yeah.
But the Flyers play a better team game, and so therefore the Flyers are better.
Yeah. And and this is the Torts effect. So if you want to know what the Torts effect is like, this is full swing Torts effect right now. Team that's not as talented, he's got them firing on all cylinders right now, and they're playing great hockey because they're playing a team game. They're playing a team game, and that's what's happened. And that's the Torts effect. So whether you like him, in terms of what he's able to do for your team, I only have high praise for him. I really do. I can't say he hasn't done a good job. He's done a great job. I mean, in terms of what he has to work with and where this team is, again, knocking back on the door of the 8th spot again, it's impressive work by John Tortorella, and it's impressive work by the team to buy into what he's selling. The only thing I'll tell you is you could take the same team back with the same exact coach in another year, and it might not be the same team.
Sure.
Just to let you know, that's just this is not written in concrete.
And I'll say this, barring a trade for a goalie, let's just imagine things just kind of stay as they are. They're still not making the playoffs because of the goaltending situation. And their schedule is not very forgiving. Once again, the Flyers get a couple tough stretches in the second half of the season. I mean, I look at the fact that they got to play the Devils 3 times in 2 weeks. Like, that's not good. And that's really the only tough part of January. Other than that, there's winnable games. Detroit, the Islanders 2 more times, the Rangers. Like, those are winnable games. And then, right before the break, you got to go Colorado, Utah on the road, and then come home and play Washington. That's not going to be easy. But once again, last year it was
games, they have some pretty.
Last year it was in March,
close.
and again it's going to be in March this year.
Yeah.
The difference is this year they got a lot of them at home. But Winnipeg, Calgary, Winnipeg, and then you get Seattle, who's they can beat. You get the Devils, Ottawa, who you're in the mix with, right? But they're probably better than Ottawa. Tampa, Carolina, Tampa, Washington, Dallas, and then a break against Chicago, and then Toronto. Like, I mean, the schedule gets brutal in March again. So without a goalie, without a number 1 goalie, I still don't think they make it. But if they had one, this is a playoff team.
Does that change the trajectory though, Anthony, of what they're trying to do? Right? You got a lot more salvageable players.
Well, I think some of them are salvageable. Not all. I still think there are guys that probably need to still get moved out of here. Look, Farabee had a really good game last night, right? I think he played really well.
He did.
First game back after being a healthy scratch for 3 games, right? I think he played well. I still don't know that this is a good fit for him with Tortorella and the way Torts coaches the team wants the team to play. I think Farabee's a decent player who can succeed somewhere else. And so, maybe in the long run, is he a good fit for here? No. Is he a good player that teams might be interested in? Sure. So a guy like that, I look at and say, that's not like a veteran player that you want to move off of. He's still kind of young. But at the same time, it's like, all right, might not be the right fit. So but I do think there are guys that you look at and go, oh, okay, maybe we can work something here. Hey, look, I don't get caught up in the Morgan Frost hot streak, right?
Well, it's the second half of the season. It's Morgan Frost season.
It's 4 games in a row.
He eats in the second half, and he likes to eat against bad teams. So
4 games in a row, he's played well.
Yeah,
he's played well, Russ. I can't take anything away from Morgan Frost. He's putting points on the board.
Yep,
he's playing really well.
And Konechny has been sensational.
He has.
He has been. Yes.
He's been sensational.
He has more than lived up to the hype of the contract. And
yes.
It's really tough for a guy, especially after you get the term and you get the money, and there's a perception out there that it could have been an overpay. You go out and you perform at the level that he has. He has lived up to it. there is once again that case that can be made about, there were a lot of fans who thought that maybe he would have been a guy who could have been considered to get the C on the sweater. Assuming he continues to play at this level, no one ever seems to know what will happen long-term with Sean Couturier. Is there a scenario where he could eventually get the C? He is pretty much the perfect kind of Flyers player. Him being able to show up in big moments, it's not like he's just doing this against bottom-feeding teams.
He's right there now. Like
all year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's top 10 in the league in scoring, guys. I don't know if you realize that. He's tied for 10th in the league in scoring with 53 points. That's pretty impressive.
He has had a great season. There is no getting around it. Can I just really quick, I just for the sake of making sure that we're doing due diligence here, you mentioned the possibility of trading for a goalie, Ant.
Yeah.
Everyone is going to know how I feel about it, so I don't need to say it. But what percentage chance would you put it that Danny Briere, in the midst of year 2 of the rebuild, seeing where the team is, seeing that they are kind of in that pack of, it's still a very tight group between the second worst odds and, like, let's say the 8th or 9th worst odds, and also theoretically having a chance to make a playoff run, I guess, or be a bubble team, what percentage would you put it that Briere is going to essentially abandon rebuild year 2 to chase a playoff spot by going and getting a goalie? Because to be clear, that's the only reason that you would go out and acquire a goalie. You have enough guys in the system, so what are the odds?
I still think it's way too early to make a determination on that, in all honesty, because I think it's one of those situations where he's looking at it and saying, okay, look, if we're there at the deadline, we can be a playoff team. We can go get a goalie, and that's maybe what he looks at as a possibility. You still got a ways to go before you get to that. You still got to play another 12 games.
Yep.
And if you're chasing, if you're still 4 points out at that point, you're probably not doing it. You're
think
probably
that they would need to be like in the 8th spot or like the 9th spot in order to
right
justify
there.
it?
They need to be right there and not have to climb over 5-team or 4.
I will. I'll never forget Gar Snow when he was GM of the Islanders. This is going back like 15 years ago. They won like something like 9 out of 10 games at some point in the schedule, and they were behind. Like they were like where the Flyers were, let's say, right? And I remember he told me, he goes, "Yeah, we made up like 2 points." That's exactly what he told me. That's how hard it is to cover ground when you're down. So, the problem is with the Flyers is that they do play a very good team game. Like they come at you in waves. They're defending up the middle of the ice. They're doing a great job defensively in their zone. But the one thing that you can't really control is the nights you play well and you still lose. It doesn't go your way. Yeah. And there's been a lot of those nights for this team this year where, their goaltending had let them down, or a bad goal, or they deserved far better in the game and they ended up losing. The Columbus game was a good example of that a couple games back, losing overtime. They deserved a lot better in that hockey game than they got. I'll be honest with you, it's been a while since I've seen a team that's achieved as much as they have in terms of the way they play the game, how hard they play the game, and they struggle for results. And that's tough. That's tough. But Danny and Jones, you're going to have to figure out what they want to do. I mean, Anthony, again, you'd know better than me or get more information, but I can't imagine them getting a John Gibson. Like, I don't know if it's just for 1 year. I mean, it seems like if you watch Gibson play last week against us, man, that was not a very good showing.
There's also the team in front of it too.
Bad, I understand, but they're but it's funny. They're not the worst team in the league. Like they've actually have some wins. They
I don't know how.
I have no idea how either, because we saw a really bad version of Anaheim here in Philadelphia last week.
Mm-hmm. I thought we saw a bad version of them when the Flyers played out there last month too. Like I thought I watched it
and somehow got worse.
Yeah, well, the Flyers obviously want to play them. They like playing them because of the Cutter Gauthier situation. I'm sure gets them all riled up. But it's a tough schedule, like Anthony said, a busy schedule, and how are you going to do that? The problem is the Flyers are playing really well right now, and everybody's kind of amped up a little bit. Problem is, what happens when you accidentally go out and just lose 3 games in a row, right? Yeah. And you're playing well.
I mean, when they had 8 games in 15 days to start March.
Yeah, I know.
Who's playing in goal? Who's playing in goal? Like, you can't rely on one guy to play most of those games, right? So that's what I'm trying to say. It becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we all know where I stand on rebuild and not. If this team somehow, like, say they don't make a deal for a goalie. I do still hold very firm in the belief that like there should be at least 1 or 2 trades made by the deadline. There just should be. Like because the same way that you can look at it as saying like, hey, you're trying to chase that last playoff spot. Maybe that goes into the calculus of whether or not you go and get a goalie or not. I can also look at it the inverse way, where I say, all right, 12 points right now is what separates the Flyers right now at the 10th worst odds and San Jose at the 2nd worst odds. Again, Chicago's in their own kind of place, and San Jose is starting to fall further into that same realm where it's like they're going to be in a class of their own in terms of how bad they are. If this team makes a trade, or even if they don't, I mean, if they don't, it's bad. But if they don't make a trade and they also don't get a goalie, but they're somehow still within playoff contention, and they go into that month of March, which is an absolute hell month.
Yeah.
If they somehow galvanize and they make a run, for as much as I'm a team, go and get the top pick, if they actively don't do anything to improve the team, and that team somehow goes out and just competes every night, and they pick up the wins, and they make the playoffs, and they go as a hot team, fundamentally, from a long-term view, I hate it, but like at least in terms of like the season itself, it's kind of hard to argue. If they get hot against that set of teams, and they go in as a battle-tested group, you would also then presumably be getting top-level goaltending out of 2 of the 3 of Ersin Kolosov and Fedotov, which from a longer-term play is probably also a good thing. So I don't see it. Like, I don't see a scenario where the Flyers do nothing at the deadline and somehow still sneak into the playoffs. But weirder things have happened. Like, we've seen it. I don't think that the Flyers then go and pull off a round 1 upset. They probably are an easy out, and then we're talking about hockey purgatory again. But
not necessarily
know,
an easy out, Russ. They're not the way they play. Like if they play like this and got the extra save, you don't know in a playoff
yeah,
series.
then let me rephrase
really
it. Not
don't.
an easy out. I just mean like a first-round exit. Like I think eventually the playing as a team, there is a lot to be said for it. But when the rubber hits the road in the postseason, yes, there have been complacent teams before, and Tortorella has led an 8 seed to a first-round win. I just don't know if this team has it, but we're very far away from even having to decide if they do or they don't.